You will not be surprised to learn that I receive a lot of comments, emails, and direct messages asking, hey man, which car should I get? And I always turn those around with three questions. Number one, where do you live? Number two, what are you doing with it? And absolutely the most important, number three, how long do you want to keep it? Because if the answer is longer than 5 years, my list of suggestions goes from this to this. And if someone is asking about like a mid-size luxury sports sedan, invariably, I always include a Hyundai Genesis or a Genesis G80, and the reasons are very simple. The second generation car had a suspension designed by the folks at Lotus. They're all screwed together incredibly well, and whether they're new or used, they're kind of a really good value. Now we move into a totally new generation, the third generation, and we get a very early car from Genesis. Huge asterisk there. This one is a pre-production prototype, not like the Lexus convertible we had, where I told you we couldn't drive it, but I fudged it anyway and we drove it. This one, it just got off a plane. It's held together with like chewing gum and spit. It doesn't even have number plates. So it's gonna stay here in the hangar, and we're gonna do an in-depth tech review on the differences of the third gen Genesis G80. Over the lifespan of the Hyundai Genesis and subsequent Genesis G80, there were two engines on offer, a V6 and a V8. Here, there's still two engines on offer. However, there is a pretty big departure. There's still the V6, a twin turbo in this case, but there's no more V8. Instead, there's a four-cylinder turbo, and that becomes the basic engine. Now, we've seen this engine in other cars within the Hyundai-Kia Group empire. The first one we saw was the Hyundai Sonata N-Line that we got a very brief look at back in December, and that's a 2.5 turbo. It'll be a 2.5 turbo here, and we're also going to see it in the coming K5 in the GT trim. Here, it's got a little bit more horsepower than those. It's 300 horsepower and 311 pound-feet of torque that comes in at a very low 1,650 RPM, stays flat all the way up to 4,400 RPM. Then there's the twin-turbo V6, which this is. Now, you may think it's just like in the Stinger. You'd sort of be right. In the Stinger, it's a 3.3. Here, it's a 3.5, and it ups the output. So it goes from 365 to 375 horsepower, and the torque also goes up from 376 to 391. Yeah, that's a big function of the displacement. Now, I'd love to tell you that there's some other stuff there, and there is. However, the Genesis folks didn't tell me because this is still a very early look at the car, so we're gonna have to come back and talk more about those changes when we drive the car. Now, whether it's a four-cylinder or a six-cylinder twin turbo, any transmission you want, as long as it's an 8-speed automatic, and like the previous car, it goes to the rear wheels, or there's still an option for all-wheel drive. Moving to what underpins the car is another area where we don't have all the information from Genesis just yet in this very early look. However, this is an area where I could take matters into my own hands, so I literally crawled underneath the car to determine what suspends it. And up front is a very intricate double wishbone setup. In the rear is a multi-link setup. Then there are the wheels. Now, the most basic car is 18-inch wheels. Then the mid-grade car, which is called an Advance, as well as all-wheel drive cars, 19-inch wheels. This, however, is the fanciest one they make. It's a Prestige, so it's fitted with a 20-inch wheel. Then there are the brakes, and if I'm reading the tea leaves correctly, the brakes are the same, at least in diameter, whether it's a basic car or a fancy one. However, the fancy one, the Prestige, the front caliper changes. It moves to what's called a monoblock caliper. Now, you and I look at serial production cars all the time, and most of them have a caliper that's two pieces that are sandwiched together, much easier and cheaper to manufacture. A monoblock is one piece. It's literally one casting. And the logic is it's stronger, so it's more resistant to flexing. Inside, there are a number of points that stand out, yet top of my list is tactile feel, and this is something you and I have become accustomed to from the folks from Genesis, yet this is a couple levels above anything they've done before. And really what they've done is they've given thought to the things you touch most frequently. Like, for example, the stalks. At the end of each stalk, it's knurled kind of like a Bentley. Yet that's a design theme throughout the entire interior of the car. Another example, the infotainment screen, now 14.5-inch diagonal. That's controlled by a scroll wheel, a hard control scroll wheel that is also knurled. And then that's repeated throughout a couple of other things. The volume control, as well as the tune control, those are scroll wheels, kind of like in a Mercedes. And then the temperature controls, both right and left, those are rotary knobs, also knurled. That said, there are a couple of changes I would humbly request, Chief, being the rotary controller for the transmission. That has been pilfered from Ford and/or Lincoln. Please do not do this. Can we go back to a real shifter? And then number two, we've done such a wonderful job with these knurled controls, and I get that you want to bury some of the items in the haptic feedback screens, like the ones that aren't used as much, the level of cooled and heated seats. I get that. However, fan speed and the direction of the air, that's a frequently used item. Can we have two more of these rotary control knobs, put them here? Not only would that look so much better, it would be much safer. Now let's press on to the more flash stuff. Matte wood finish, very nice. Only on the fancy one, the basic one is piano black. And then, probably the coolest thing in here, a 3D set of gauges. So you can switch on and off a 3D instrument cluster. That, would love to see that in more cars. In addition to the 3D trick, they pilfered a party trick from, of all places, a Hyundai Sonata. Remember the one we drove in Arizona in December? That we were able to stand outside the car with the key fob and park it either parallel or perpendicular. You can do the same thing here with this key fob. And then last but not least, entering items into the navigation or other parts of infotainment, not just by going through a keyboard, not entirely new to the car world, but new to the Genesis world. So let's say I want to go into navigation and I want to search for an address. I would use the inside of the scroll wheel here. So let's try spelling Torrance out. That didn't work. Let's try it again. There's the T and I have to confirm it. And then O, I got that. And let's see if it does the R. I got that. Let's do another R. Anyway, you get the idea. It kind of works. It's a little bit slow, but a neat trick. Design is always a difficult discussion to have with you guys because I never like to tell you what you can see, and in reality, beauty is indeed in the eye of the beholder. Yet we do need to have a discussion about some of the more controversial elements here. The elephant in the room being that grille. Now, full disclosure, on a G90, this just does not work because what they do there is take a new design ethos, language, whatever the kids are calling it nowadays, and they slap it onto an older design. It's just not cohesive. Here it works, and not to get pornographic on you, it works because it's more sensual. There's curvature to the front of the car with this grille, and that is used to balance a lot of the lines throughout the car. Now, usually when you and I see a lot of straight lines in a design, like we see in the C8, it's a very busy design. Here, that's not the case. Great example of that. Do you remember the update to the Bentley Continental GT for 2015? They put this beautiful crease into the fender, and it terminated at the back of the front wheel well. Well, this, it's very similar. It starts in the fender, but goes all the way to the back of the car. And what that does, it makes the car look longer, which increases the overall presence. Really changes things. But then they pick up on that line, and they use that for the light signature. Now, all cars nowadays, they need light signatures. Sometimes it works very well, like an Escalade or a Porsche. Sometimes not so much, like the G90, specifically in the rear, because what they do is they have those lines, but they run the width of that car. Here, again, it's more sensual because the light signature, both front and rear, is just the corners. And there, it actually does the intended job. So much so, whether it's car guys like you and I, or strap hangers in New York City, they're not going to confuse this with any other car. Now, rather than me pontificate about design anymore about this, I'm going to turn this around to you guys. What design elements do you like here? What design elements do you not like, and why? And I ask very specifically because you may remember about 10 or 11 years ago, you and I built a Hyundai concept car that we literally were embedded into the Irvine Design Studio for 9 months. Well, all of those people that worked on that project, they got many promotions over the past 10 or 11 years, and now they run Genesis Design. So take a wild guess who designed this. So I want to take your comments and share them with John, Brad, and the gang, and hopefully we can discuss them in more detail in a coming Inside the MOTOMAN Studio episode. Couple of points you and I need to address back here. First being, this is where I, a 6-footer, would sit, yet I can provide myself with a bit more knee room here. Button here controls the seat back, button here controls the seat bottom, and this is only on offer in the fancy Prestige model. Speaking of Prestige, it is rather flash back here. The rear passengers have their own HVAC controller, yet that can be controlled both from the rear as well as from the front. Then on top of that, heated seats on both sides and a controller for the sunshade back there. This one is manual, yet no controller for the sunroof sunshade. That I would like to see back here. That'd be a nice touch. And then most importantly, dimensions. The previous generation of this car was quite a bit longer in terms of wheelbase than other cars people would think about, like a 5 Series or an E-Class. Now, the current generation 5 Series, that has grown quite a bit. That is now only an inch shorter than this new generation G80 in terms of wheelbase. The E-Class, that one is still 3 inches shorter in wheelbase than this current generation G80. No, it is not indeed that time again to play our favorite game, the options game. Rather, it's too early to play the options game. However, I can share with you some preliminary figures. The most basic 4-cylinder two-wheel drive car, about $48,000. The most basic 4-cylinder all-wheel drive car, about $51,000 US. The most basic V6 two-wheel drive, $59,000 US. This one, Prestige, everything, including all-wheel drive and twin-turbo V6, about $68,000 US. Now, before we part ways today, 2 things. Number one, something that appeals to my OCD side. You know how the trunk floor, you gotta pull it up to get to the spare tire or tire inflator or the battery, and you gotta hold it and it always falls on your head? Here, there is a clip that holds it up. And number 2, Genesis didn't send only one car, which means we have another pre-production prototype tech review to get to, this time the 2021 Genesis G80, their first ever SUV. So until I see you in that tech review, bis später.